There are 3 rules to surviving a heist. Never sneeze, never get greedy, and never assume the room is empty just because it's quiet. I had followed the first 2 perfectly. As for the third, well, I was about to find out exactly how wrong I was. The rain over Seoul was unforgiving tonight. It wasn't a soft drizzle. It was a deluge that hammered against the slate roof of the mansion, drowning out the world below. For anyone else, the storm was a nuisance. For me, it was cover. The thunder masked the sound of my glass cutter, and the lightning scrambled the light sensors just enough for me to slip through the cracks of the perimeter. I crouched on the ledge of the 3rd-story balcony, the damp night air clinging to my tactical suit. Below me, the city of Seoul was a sprawling grid of neon veins, pulsing with life and vice. But up here, in the hills of Gangnam, everything was silent. This wasn't just a house, it was a fortress. The locals called the owner the Phantom. They said Yun Sang didn't sleep, that he had eyes made of cameras and ears made of microphones. They said he was a ghost. I didn't believe in ghosts. I believed in blueprints, thermal loops, and the fact that every system had a flaw. I checked my wrist computer. The localized jamming signal was holding. I had exactly 12 minutes before the backup servers realized the West Wing cameras were looping the same 10 seconds of empty hallway. 12 minutes to clear a debt that's lasted 5 years, I whispered to myself, the words barely a breath against the glass. I wasn't here for the art on the walls or the cash in the safe. The Vipers, the lovely syndicate that owned my life, had been specific. They wanted the Star of Midnight. A diamond the size of a pigeon's egg, rumor had it, tucked away in a vault that rivaled the Bank of Korea. I slid the glass door open. It moved on silent, oiled tracks. Stepping inside, the air changed immediately. The humidity of the storm was replaced by the sterile, climate-controlled chill of extreme wealth. It smelled of lemon polish, old paper, and something metallic, like the taste of blood on a split lip. My boots made no sound on the marble floor. I moved like smoke, hugging the shadows of the corridor. I counted the steps, left at the Ming vase, right at the abstract sculpture that looked like a scream frozen in bronze. A laser grid flickered across the hallway ahead. It was invisible to the naked eye, but my goggles painted the beams in angry red lines. I exhaled, slowing my heart rate. If my pulse went above 100, the biometric sensors in the walls would trigger the silent alarm. Calm down, Tabia. Just a walk in the park. I dropped to the floor, sliding under the lowest beam. I arched my back, muscles screaming as I contorted around the second array. It was a dance I'd practiced 1,000 times in a warehouse simulation, but the real thing always carried a sharper edge. One slip, and I wouldn't just be caught, I'd be erased. The Black Lotus cartel didn't call the police. They handled their own trash. I cleared the grid and stood up, smoothing the front of my suit. The master bedroom was ahead, but I bypassed it. The vault wasn't in the bedroom. It was in the study, hidden behind a panel of mahogany that cost more than my childhood home. The study was dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of the city filtering through heavy velvet drapes. I approached the bookshelf. I didn't need to search for the trigger mechanism. The Vipers had good intel. I pulled the leather-bound copy of Dante's Inferno. With a heavy thud, the bookcase swung inward. There it was, the vault door. It was a circular beast of brushed steel and titanium, glowing with a soft blue keypad light. It looked impenetrable. To me, it looked like an invitation. I pulled the stethoscope from my belt and pressed the diaphragm against the cold steel. I didn't bother with the keypad. Brute forcing the code would take too long. I went for the mechanical tumbler backup. Old school, reliable. I closed my eyes, blocking out the visual noise. The world narrowed down to the friction of metal on metal. Spin left. Click. 1. Spin right. Slower. Slower. Clunk. 2. My fingers were steady, but sweat trickled down the back of my neck. The silence in the house was heavy, oppressive. It felt less like an empty house and more like a held breath. I pushed the thought away. Paranoia was a thief's worst enemy. Spin left again. The final tumbler fell into place with a satisfying, heavy resonance. Click. Welcome back, my fierce hearts and midnight dreamers. Before we dive into the vault, make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our little dark romance family stretch across cities, countries, and time zones. Every click, every comment, every bit of love you leave here helps us keep unraveling these dangerous love stories and high-stakes betrayals together. So find your quiet place, dim the lights, and get ready. Let's begin. The sound of the lock disengaging echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room. I waited a beat, holding my breath, expecting sirens. Nothing, just the rain drumming against the distant windows. I gripped the massive steel handle and pulled. The hydraulics hissed, a long, weary sigh as the door swung open. The inside of the vault was pitch black. I didn't turn on my flashlight immediately. I let my eyes adjust, sensing the space. It was small, intimate. The air inside was stale and dry. I stepped over the threshold. In the center of the room, on a black velvet pedestal, it sat. Even in the gloom, the star of midnight seemed to pull in the ambient light and fracture it into 1,000 cold sparks. It was beautiful. It was freedom. I reached out, my gloved fingers inches from the stone. My heart hammered against my ribs, the victory lap. I had done it. I had broken into the unbreakable fortress. I was going to walk out of here, toss this rock to the vipers, and never look over my shoulder again. I was smiling. Then, the smell hit me. It wasn't the smell of the vault. It was a distinct sharp aroma cutting through the sterile air. Sandalwood, expensive tobacco, and the warmth of a body. The hairs on my arms stood up. I wasn't alone. I froze, my hand still hovering over the diamond. My instincts screamed at me to run, to strike, to move, but my body was locked in the sudden, horrifying realization of that third rule. Never assume the room is empty. From the deepest corner of the vault, a shadow detached itself from the wall. The distinct metallic shake of a Zippo lighter tore through the silence. A flame erupted, dancing yellow and orange, illuminating a sharp jawline, high cheekbones, and eyes that were darker than the abyss I had just walked into. He was sitting in a high-backed leather chair that I hadn't even seen, his legs crossed casually, a cigarette resting between his fingers. He looked perfectly at ease, like a king waiting for his court jester to finish a performance. Young sang. The Phantom. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look angry. He looked bored. He brought the cigarette to his lips, the ember glowing bright red as he inhaled, casting a demonic light over his features. He held the smoke for a moment, his gaze pinning me to the spot like a butterfly on a board, before exhaling a long gray plume into the space between us. He snapped the lighter shut, plunging his face back into the semi-darkness, leaving only the cherry of the cigarette burning. His voice was low, smooth, and terrified me more than a scream ever could. "You're 3 minutes late, Miss Hill." Muscle memory is a funny thing. It bypasses the brain, ignoring logic and fear, moving purely on survival instinct. Before his sentence had even finished echoing off the steel walls, I was moving. I didn't scream, I didn't freeze. My hand whipped to the sheath at my thigh, and in less than a second, 6 inches of matte black carbon steel was leveled at his throat. I dropped into a combat stance, knees bent, center of gravity low, ready to spring. "Don't move," I hissed. My voice was steady, but my chest felt like it was caving in. Young Song didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He just watched the tip of my blade with mild curiosity, as if I were a piece of abstract art he hadn't quite decided where to hang yet. He took another drag of his cigarette, the smoke curling lazily around his face. A karambit, he noted, his voice smooth and terrifyingly conversational. Efficient. Brutal. A bit theatrical for a cat burglar, don't you think? "Stand up," I ordered, edging sideways to keep the open door in my periphery. "Hands where I can see them." "My hands are right here, Tabia," he said, gesturing vaguely with the hand holding the cigarette. "And as for standing up, I've been waiting for you for 2 hours. I'm quite comfortable." I glanced at the door. No guards. No sirens. Just him. That scared me more than a SWAT team. If he was alone, It meant he didn't think he needed protection from me. You knew I was coming, I said. It wasn't a question. He finally moved, leaning forward to tap the ash into a crystal tray on the small table beside him. Miss Hill, I didn't just know you were coming. I sent the invitation. He picked up a sleek, black remote and pointed it at the wall to my left. A hidden panel slid back, revealing a bank of high-definition monitors. My stomach dropped through the floor. On the screens, I saw myself. Screen 1, me scaling the perimeter wall. Screen 2, me bypassing the laser grid. Screen 3, me cracking the safe not 30 seconds ago. You have excellent form, he said, sounding like a bored professor grading a disappointing paper. Your agility is top tier. Your lockpicking is adequate, but you have a tell. He paused the footage on the center screen. It was me, pausing at the intersection of the East Wing hallway. Right there, he said, pointing a slender finger at the screen. You checked your watch. You were worried about the jamming signal loop. In that split second of distraction, you missed the thermal variance sensor in the floorboards. You stepped right on it. I stared at the screen, a cold sweat breaking out under my tactical suit. I had checked the schematics. There were no thermal sensors there. It wasn't on the blueprints, I snapped. Of course not, he replied, a hint of a smirk touching his lips. I updated the security protocols this morning. If I hadn't deactivated the automated turrets manually, you would have been cut in half at 11:42 p.m. He killed the screens, plunging us back into the intimate, smoky dimness of the vault. I let you in, he said softly. I wanted to see if the Viper's best asset lived up to the hype. Imagine my disappointment when I found you to be merely competent. I tightened my grip on the knife, my knuckles turning white. If you want to critique my performance, buy a ticket. If you want to arrest me, call the cops. Otherwise, I'm walking out of here. Are you? He stood up then. The movement was fluid, like water flowing uphill. He was taller than he looked in the chair, over 6 feet of tailored charcoal suit and lean muscle. He took a step toward me. I tensed, ready to slash. But he stopped just out of range. You're not here for the diamond, he said. You're here because you owe the Vipers $4 million. A debt inherited from a father who didn't know when to stop gambling. My breath hitched. That wasn't public knowledge. You steal to pay the interest, he continued, taking another step. But the principle never goes down, does it? You're a hamster in a wheel, running until you die. Back off, I warned, shifting my weight. I made a call an hour ago, he said, ignoring my threat completely. I spoke to the Viper's leadership. I offered to settle your account. My mind reeled. What? I bought you, Tabia. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I paid your debt, he clarified, his dark eyes locking onto mine. Every cent. You don't owe the Vipers anything anymore. You're free of them. For a second, a wave of dizzying relief washed over me, followed immediately by the crash of reality. Men like Yun Young Sang didn't give away $4 million out of charity. So, I said, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts. I owe you now? Yes. He took the final step, closing the distance. I didn't strike. I couldn't. I was paralyzed by the gravity of the situation. He was close enough that I could smell the expensive cologne clinging to his skin, something spicy and cold, like winter wood. But I'm not interested in money, he murmured, looking down at me. I have more money than God. I need a skill set. I need a ghost. He reached out, and for a terrifying moment I thought he was going to touch my face. Instead, he gently pushed the blade of my knife down until it was pointing at the floor. There is a drive, he said. A prototype decryption key. It is currently sitting in the biometric vault of the Iron Triad's headquarters. The Iron Triad. The only syndicate in Seoul more violent than the Black Lotus. Stealing from them was suicide. It was madness. You want me to steal from the Triad? I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. I'd rather go back to jail. Jail isn't the alternative, he said quietly. If you refuse, I won't kill you. I'm a businessman, not a butcher. I'll simply hand you back to the Vipers. But since I've already paid your debt, they'll assume you cut a deal and betrayed them. You know what they do to traitors. I did. They didn't just kill them. They made them beg for death for days. So, he stepped back, buttoning his suit jacket with an infuriating calmness. The choice is yours, Miss Hill. You can walk out that door and try your luck with your old masters. Or, you can stay here, become my guest, and do the one thing I cannot do myself. Steal the drive, and the debt is wiped clean. You leave Seoul a free woman with a fresh identity. He extended a hand. It was a business gesture, but it felt like a deal with the devil. Die in a basement with the Vipers, he whispered, or risk your life for a chance at real freedom with me. I looked at his hand. I looked at the dark eyes that showed absolutely no mercy, only calculation. I sheathed my knife. The click was the loudest sound in the world. I hate you, I said. I know, he replied, a ghost of a smile haunting his lips. We start tomorrow at dawn. Daylight didn't make the mansion less intimidating. It just made the bars harder to see. When the sun rose over Seoul, it turned Yun Young-song's estate into a blinding prism of glass and steel. From the ground, it probably looked like a crown jewel perched on the skull of the hill. From the inside, it felt like a sterile aquarium. The walls were floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city below, the smog, the traffic, the millions of people living lives that didn't involve owing their souls to a crime lord. I wasn't a guest. I was an asset in storage. My room was luxurious, filled with Egyptian cotton sheets and furniture that cost more than a kidney, but the door locked from the outside at night. During the day, I had roaming privileges. That was Young Sang's way of saying I could wander the cage, but I couldn't fly. I spent the first 3 days looking for a crack in the armor. I paced the perimeter of the garden, pretending to admire the manicured bonsai trees while actually memorizing the rotation of the security cameras. Every 90 seconds there was a blind spot near the service gate. It was small, barely 4 seconds, but for me, 4 seconds was an eternity. On the 4th afternoon, I found a tablet left on a patio table. It was unlocked. Careless. Or maybe, a test. I didn't hesitate. I sat down, crossing my legs casually, and tapped into the system settings. I bypassed the user interface and went straight for the kernel. My fingers flew across the glass surface. If I could bridge the local Wi-Fi with the gate's control node, I could trigger a maintenance cycle. The gates would open for 30 seconds. I watched the progress bar load. Running exploit. 40%. 60%. My heart began to thrum against my ribs. I looked toward the house. The windows were dark, reflecting the gray sky. 80%. 90%. I was already calculating the sprint. 50 yards to the gate. Down the ravine. Into the subway system. 99%. The screen flashed red. Access denied. A sharp burst of static cut through the garden, followed by a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Nice try, Tabia. I froze, looking up at the hidden speakers in the eaves of the house. Young Sang's voice was dry, lacking any anger, which somehow made it worse. But the encryption changes every 60 seconds, he continued, the sound crisp and high fidelity. And you're using a guest tablet with parental controls enabled. I believe you're currently trying to hack a military-grade firewall with a device restricted to YouTube Kids and weather apps. I glared at the nearest camera, flipping at the bird. Go to hell, Young Sang, I muttered. Dinner is at 8, the voice replied, smooth as silk. Don't be late. He didn't sleep. I realized that on the 5th night. The insomnia was perhaps the only thing we had in common. While the house slumbered, I sat on the edge of my balcony, wrapped in a silk robe that felt too soft against my skin, watching the darkness. Below me, the infinity pool glowed with a soft, ethereal turquoise light. Steam rose from the heated water, curling into the cold night air like ghosts dancing, and cutting through the water, lap after lap, was the phantom. He swam with a terrifying discipline. There was no splashing, no wasted energy, just the rhythmic stroke of his arms and the smooth turn at the wall. He was a machine. He stopped at the far end, pulling himself up onto the ledge. The underwater lighting cast strange, rippling shadows across his wet skin. From this distance I could see the map of violence written on his body. A jagged scar ran down his left shoulder. Another marred his ribs. But it was his back that held my attention. A massive, intricate tattoo covered him from neck to waist. A black lotus flower blooming out of a bed of skulls. It was a masterpiece of ink, marking him as royalty in the underworld. He stood there for a moment, water dripping from his hair, staring out at the city lights. He looked lonely. He looked dangerous. He looked like a man who carried the weight of 1,000 sins and didn't regret a single one. I should have looked away. I should have gone inside and plotted his downfall. But I stayed, watching the steam rise off his shoulders, admiring the sheer, brutal capability of the body that kept me prisoner. He turned his head slightly, as if sensing eyes on him. I stepped back into the shadows of my room, my heart racing. Dinner was a battlefield disguised as a meal. The dining room was a cavernous space with a table long enough to seat 20, but only 2 places were set. He sat at the head, and I sat to his right. The distance between us felt calculated. The silence was punctuated only by the clinking of silver against fine china. We were eating something French and complicated. Duck confit with a reduction that tasted of blackberries and iron. "You're not eating," young Sang observed, not looking up from his plate. He was dressed in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal his forearms. No tie. It was the most casual I'd seen him, which meant he was still better dressed than anyone I'd ever known. "I'm worried it's poisoned," I said, pushing a piece of duck around my plate. "If I wanted to kill you, I wouldn't ruin a vintage Pinot Noir to do it," he said, taking a sip of his wine. "I'd use a bullet. It's cheaper. Comforting." He wiped his mouth with a linen napkin. "You studied at Yonsei University before you dropped out. History of art and architecture." I stiffened. "You read my file. Congratulations." "I was curious," he said, leaning back. He gestured to the painting hanging on the wall behind me. It was a massive, chaotic oil painting of a storm at sea. "Tell me about this one. Is it a fake?" I didn't turn around. I knew the painting. I'd clocked it the first time I walked in. "It's an original Ivazovsky," I said flatly. "Mid-19th century. Russian Romanticism. It depicts the struggle of man against the overwhelming power of nature." "A generic answer," he critiqued. "What do you see when you look at it?" I turned then, looking at the churning dark waves and the tiny, fragile ship. "I see a warning," I said, my voice hardening. "It's not about nature. It's about arrogance. The captain of that ship thought he could navigate a storm he didn't understand. He thought the wood and canvas would protect him from the deep." I turned back to face young Sang. He was wrong. The ocean doesn't care how expensive your ship is. It swallows you all the same. Young Sang stared at me. The silence stretched, heavy and thick. For the first time since we met, the boredom in his eyes vanished. It was replaced by a sharp, gleaming intelligence. He wasn't looking at a thief anymore. He was looking at an equal. "And you think I am the captain in this metaphor?" he asked softly. "I think you're the storm," I countered. "But even storms run out of rain eventually." A slow smile spread across his face. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who had finally found prey that could run fast enough to make the chase interesting. "Well said, Miss Hill," he murmured, picking up his glass. "Well said." He took a drink, his eyes never leaving mine. "Tomorrow we begin training. You have the theory. Now let's see if you can survive the practice." The dojo was a testament to the man, stark, beautiful, and utterly unforgiving. It was located in the basement, a soundproofed cube of white walls and pale bamboo flooring. There were no distractions, no windows to the outside world, no humming electronics, just the smell of tatami mats, chalk dust, and the sharp metallic tang of violence. "Again," young Sang said. I was panting, my lungs burning as if I'd swallowed hot coals. I wiped a line of sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand and reset my stance. "I've done it 20 times, I gritted out. "And you've died 20 times, he replied calmly. He was standing 5 feet away, dressed in a black gi that was loosely tied at the waist, exposing the hard lines of his chest. He wasn't even winded. He looked like he was waiting for a bus, not training an operative for a suicide mission. He held up the training knife, a rubber composite that mimicked the weight of the ceramic blade I'd be carrying into the Iron Triad's gala. "The Triad's enforcers are not mall cops, Tabia," he lectured, pacing slowly in a circle around me. "They are trained in Krav Maga and Muay Thai. They don't fight to arrest. They fight to maim. If you hesitate, if you telegraph your move, you bleed." "I know how to fight," I snapped, pivoting to keep him in my sight line. "You know how to survive," he corrected. "There is a difference. You fight like a rat in a corner. Frantic. Messy. I need you to fight like a surgeon." He lunged. There was no warning, no shift in his eyes. 1 second he was standing still, the next, he was a blur of motion. The rubber knife slashed toward my carotid. I reacted on instinct. I batted his arm away with my forearm, twisting my hips to minimize the target area. I tried to grapple his wrist, looking for a leverage point to disarm him, but it was like trying to grab smoke. He flowed around my defense, his movement fluid and heavy like mercury. He swept my leg. I hopped, trying to maintain balance, but he was already inside my guard. His shoulder slammed into my solar plexus. The air rushed out of me in a pained whoosh. I stumbled back, my vision spotting. "Dead," he stated, stepping back. "You reached for the weapon. Never reach for the weapon. Control the limb. I'm a thief, not a ninja." I yelled, frustration finally boiling over. I straightened up, glaring at him. I sneak in, I sneak out. If I'm fighting, the plan has already gone to hell. "Plans always go to hell," he said darkly, "and when they do, I need to know you won't break." He tossed the rubber knife to the side. It skidded across the floor. Hand to hand, he ordered. "No weapons. Come at me." I hesitated. "You're twice my size. Then you better be faster." Something inside me snapped. It was the confinement, the arrogance, the way he looked at me like I was a puzzle he'd already solved. I didn't want to just spar. I wanted to wipe that calm, superior expression off his face. I attacked. I didn't use the forms he'd been trying to teach me. I went back to the streets. I feinted a high kick, waiting for him to raise his block, and then dropped low, driving a fist toward his ribs. He blocked it, his forearm hard as iron, but I was counting on that. I used the momentum to spin, throwing an elbow toward his jaw. Connect. My elbow grazed his chin. It wasn't a knockout blow, but it was enough to snap his head back. Satisfaction flared hot in my chest. "Not bad," he murmured, tasting the copper in his mouth. But the hit had changed the air in the room. The sterile training atmosphere evaporated, replaced by something thicker, heavier. He wasn't holding back anymore. He came at me with a terrifying intensity. We traded blows, the sound of skin striking skin echoing in the empty room. Thwack. Thud. Grunt. It was a brutal rhythm. He was fast, overwhelmingly so, but I was angry, and anger is a hell of a fuel. I ducked a roundhouse kick that would have taken my head off, the wind of it rushing past my ear. I scrambled back, but he pressed the advantage, driving me toward the edge of the mat. I was losing. I could feel it. He was dissecting me. Desperation took over. As he reached for a grapple, I didn't counter. I cheated. I dropped my weight, stomping hard on his instep, a dirty, vicious move meant to shatter small bones. As he flinched, I clawed at his eyes. It was nasty. It was street. It didn't work. He anticipated the stomp, shifting his weight instantly. He caught my hand inches from his face, his grip like a steel vise. He didn't just stop me. He used my own aggression to destroy me. He twisted my arm behind my back, forcing a cry of pain from my throat, and swept my legs out from under me. The world spun. I hit the mat hard, the breath knocked out of me for the second time. Before I could even think about scrambling away, he was on me. He straddled my waist, pinning my wrists above my head with one hand. His weight was crushing, absolute. I bucked, thrashing wildly, trying to throw him off, but he was an anchor. Let go of me. I seethed, struggling against his grip. Stop, he commanded. I froze. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't move. We were panting, chests heaving in unison. The room was silent except for the harsh sound of our breathing. He was hovering over me, his face inches from mine. A bead of sweat dripped from his temple, landing on my collarbone. It felt like a burn. I looked up at him, ready to spit defiance, but the words died in my throat. His eyes were dilated, black pools that swallowed the light. There was adrenaline there, yes, but something else too. Something raw. He wasn't looking at me like an asset anymore. He was looking at me like a man who had just realized he was holding a live grenade and enjoying the feeling of the pin sliding out. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat that I knew he could feel through our pressed chests. The anger was still there, but it was twisting, morphing into a heat that pooled low in my stomach. I was trapped beneath the man who owned my life, the man who threatened to kill me, and God help me, I wanted to pull him closer. The realization was a splash of ice water. I hated him. I hated him. He lowered his head until his lips were right beside my ear. The stubble on his jaw grazed my cheek, rough sandpaper against silk. You fight like you have nothing to lose, he whispered. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated through my bones. That makes you dangerous, Tabia, but reckless. He shifted his weight, his hips grinding against mine. It wasn't accidental, it was a claim, a reminder of who was on top. The Triad will kill reckless, he said, pulling back to look me in the eye. I need you focused. I need you cold. I am cold, I lied, my voice shaking. No, he said softly, his gaze dropping to my lips, then back up to my eyes. You're burning. The air between us crackled, charged with enough electricity to short-circuit the security system. If he kissed me now, it wouldn't be romantic. It would be a collision. It would be war. And I would have let him. The thought terrified me more than the knife. With a sudden violent shove, I managed to free one arm. I pushed against his chest. Get off, I gasped. He let me go instantly, rolling off me and springing to his feet in one fluid motion. He turned his back to me, walking toward the towel rack, adjusting his gi. I stayed on the floor for a second, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember how to breathe. My skin was tingling where he had touched me. I felt exposed, raw, and furiously confused. I scrambled up, backing away toward the door. Training is over, he said, his back still turned. His voice was flat, devoid of the heat that had been there seconds ago. The phantom was back. Good, I choked out. I turned and fled the dojo, the sound of my bare feet slapping against the floor echoing my retreat. I didn't stop running until I was in my room, with the door locked and my back pressed against it, listening to the thunder of my own treacherous heart. The storm had been threatening to break the sky in two all evening, but when it finally landed, it felt personal. I was in the library, a massive 2-story cathedral of books that smelled of cedar and old dust, trying to memorize the floor plans of the Iron Triad's complex. Young Sang was there too, sitting in a wingback chair by the window reading a dossier. We hadn't spoken much since the dojo. The air between us was still bristling with static, a mix of unresolved anger and that other dangerous thing I refused to name. Then, the world turned white. A crack of thunder shook the foundation of the house, so loud it vibrated in my teeth. Simultaneously, a bolt of lightning struck the main transformer on the ridge. The result was immediate. The hum of the air filtration system died. The soft glow of the recessed lighting vanished. The digital lock on the library door engaged with a heavy mechanical thunk. Pitch black. Stay where you are, young Sang's voice cut through the dark. He didn't sound alarmed, just practical. The generators will kick in within 10 seconds. I counted. 1, 2, 3. 10 seconds passed. Then 20. The lights didn't flicker. The house remained a tomb. The surge must have fried the transfer switch, he muttered. I heard the rustle of fabric, then the familiar clink of a lighter. A small flame erupted, casting long, dancing shadows against the rows of books. He moved to the mantel, lighting an oil lamp that I had assumed was purely decorative. A soft, golden glow expanded outward, pushing back the oppressive darkness. "Well," he said, turning to face me. The lamp was in his hand, illuminating his face from below. It softened the sharp angles of his jaw and hid the cruelty usually present in his eyes. He looked younger. Human. "It appears we are stuck. The failsafe seals the room in the event of a total power loss. We're locked in." "Perfect," I sighed, dropping the blueprints onto the table. "Trapped in the dark with the phantom." "There are worse things to be trapped with," he replied, walking over to a crystal decanter on a side table. "I have a bottle of Hibiki 30-year here. It would be a crime to drink it alone." He poured 2 glasses. The amber liquid caught the candlelight, glowing like liquid gold. He extended one to me. I hesitated. "I need to keep a clear head." "For what?" he asked, sitting down on the leather sofa opposite me. "You can't study in the dark. You can't hack the door. The storm has stopped time, Tabia. For the next hour there is no mission, there is no debt." I took the glass. The whiskey was smooth, burning pleasantly on its way down, settling like a warm coal in my stomach. The silence of the house was profound. Without the constant whir of technology, the only sound was the rain lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows. It felt like the house had been transported to the bottom of the ocean. "Why do you do it?" The question surprised me. I looked at him over the rim of my glass. "Do what?" "Steal," he said. "I looked into your background. You were a scholarship student. Top of your class. You could have been anything. An architect, an engineer. But even before your father's debt, you were lifting wallets in Hongdae. Why?" I swirled the whiskey, watching the vortex. I could have given him the tragic backstory, but in the dim light, with the rain isolating us from the rest of the world, the truth felt easier. "It's the only time the world makes sense," I said quietly. He tilted his head, waiting. "Everything out there," I gestured toward the window, "is chaos. You work hard, you still fail. You love people, they still leave. You follow the rules and you still get crushed. But a lock?" I looked at him. "A lock is binary. It's open or it's closed. A system has a logic. If I'm smart enough, if I'm fast enough, I control the outcome. When I'm in a vault, I'm not a victim of circumstance. I'm a god." Young Sang watched me for a long time. The shadows flickered across his face, making his expression unreadable. "Control," he murmured. "A seductive mistress." "What about you?" I asked, emboldened by the whiskey. "You have all the control in the world. You run this city. You own people." "I own nothing," he said, his voice dropping an octave. He looked into his glass, his expression turning melancholic. "I am a custodian of secrets. The phantom, it is a mask, a symbol. Symbols don't have friends, Tabia. They have subjects." He took a long drink, his eyes closing briefly. "I built this fortress to keep my enemies out," he whispered. "But the problem with walls is that they work both ways. I am just as much a prisoner here as you are. I rule through fear because fear is predictable. Respect is messy. Love is a liability. But fear is a currency I understand." "It sounds lonely," I said. The words were out before I could check them. He opened his eyes and looked at me. The predatory edge was gone completely, replaced by a raw, aching hollowness. "It is," he admitted. He set his glass down and leaned forward. I didn't pull back. The atmosphere in the room had shifted. The air was no longer charged with aggression. It was heavy with a magnetic, inevitable gravity. "We are the same, you and I," he said softly. He reached out. His hand, usually an instrument of violence, hovered near my face. His fingers brushed a loose curl of hair behind my ear. His touch was electric, but gentle. Terrifyingly gentle. My breath hitched. I should have slapped his hand away. I should have pulled a knife. But I was frozen, mesmerized by the dark pools of his eyes. "We are both creatures of the dark, Tabia," he whispered, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. "We don't belong in the sun. We belong in the shadows, where the rules don't apply." He leaned in closer. I could smell the oak of the whiskey and the winter wood of his cologne. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would bruise my ribs. I found myself leaning in too, drawn to him like a moth to a flame that would surely burn it alive. His gaze dropped to my lips. My eyes fluttered half shut. The space between us shrank to nothing. I could feel the warmth of his breath on my skin. The tension was unbearable, a pulled bowstring ready to snap. "Young Sang," I breathed, barely a whisper. He tilted his head, his lips millimeters from mine. Crack. A deafening boom echoed through the house as the backup generators roared to life. In an instant, the room was flooded with blinding, harsh white light from the chandelier overhead. The air conditioning unit kicked on with a mechanical whine. The electronic lock on the door beeped, unlocked. The spell didn't just break, it shattered. Young Sang pulled back as if he had been burned. The vulnerability vanished from his face instantly, replaced by the iron mask of the phantom. He stood up, smoothing his jacket, turning away from me to hide his eyes. I blinked against the sudden brightness, feeling cold and exposed. The intimacy of the candlelight was gone, leaving me sitting on the sofa with a half-empty glass of whiskey and a heart that didn't know whether to stop or explode. "The power is back," he said, his voice flat, devoid of the emotion that had been there 10 seconds ago. "Go to your room, Miss Hill. We have an early start tomorrow." He walked to the door without looking back. "Good night," he said to the empty air. I watched him leave, the taste of whiskey still on my tongue, realizing with a sinking dread that the danger wasn't the heist anymore. The danger was him, and the fact that for a second, in the dark, I hadn't wanted the lights to come back on. The dress was a weapon, just like the knife strapped to my thigh. It lay on the velvet ottoman in the center of the dressing room, a spill of blood-red silk that looked more like a liquid than a garment. Young Sang had chosen it, of course. He chose everything. I stepped into it, the fabric cool and slippery against my skin. It was backless, with a plunging neckline and a slit that ran dangerously high up my left leg, necessary for movement, lethal for distraction. I looked in the mirror. Tabia Hill, the thief in the tactical gear, was gone. In her place stood a woman who looked like she belonged on the arm of a devil. The door opened behind me. I didn't turn. I watched Young Sang enter through the reflection in the glass. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him with surgical precision, the black tie standing in stark contrast to the crisp white shirt. He stopped a few feet away, his eyes raking over me. It wasn't a look of lust, it was an inspection. He was checking the armor. "Adequate," he murmured, though his eyes lingered on the bare expanse of my back. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a long rectangular velvet box. He snapped it open. Inside lay a diamond choker, a rivière of flawless stones that glittered with a cold blue fire. "Turn around," he commanded softly. I obeyed. He stepped closer, the heat of his body radiating against my back. He lifted the necklace, draping it around my throat. The diamonds were freezing, shocking against my warm skin. "Beautiful," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "But a bit flashy for a covert op, isn't it?" "It's not just jewelry," he whispered, his fingers fumbling deliberately with the clasp at the nape of my neck. "There is a GPS tracker embedded in the center stone, and a high-gain microphone in the setting. I hear everything you hear. I see where you go." The clasp clicked shut. It was tight. Not enough to choke, but enough to be constantly felt. "A leash," I said, staring at my reflection. The diamonds looked like a collar. "Insurance," he corrected. His hands didn't pull away. Instead, they rested on my shoulders, his thumbs tracing the curve of my collarbone. He leaned in, his lips brushing my ear. "If you run, I find you. If you scream, I hear you. You are mine tonight, Tabia." In every sense of the word. A shiver raced down my spine, part fear, part thrill. I hated that he knew exactly how to dismantle my composure. "I know the plan, Young Sang," I said, my voice steady. "Don't get possessive. It's bad for the mission." "Possession is the mission," he replied, finally pulling away. "Tonight, you are not a thief. You are the fiancé of the head of the Black Lotus. Act the part." The arrival was a sensory assault. The limousine pulled up to the Grand Hyatt, and the world exploded into noise and light. The paparazzi were a wall of screaming mouths and flashing bulbs. "Mr. Yun. Over here. Who is she? Who is the mystery woman?" The door opened. Young Sang stepped out first, buttoning his jacket with practiced indifference. He turned and extended a hand to me. I took it. His grip was firm, grounding. I stepped out into the chaos, blinding flashes popping in my vision like strobes. Young Sang didn't rush. He moved with the arrogance of a man who owned the pavement he walked on. He pulled me into his side, his hand settling heavily on my waist. It was a possessive claim, visible to every lens in the crowd. "She is with me. She belongs to the darkness. Smile, my love," he murmured through his teeth, waving to a camera. "You look like you're going to a funeral." "I might be," I muttered back, forcing a dazzling plastic smile onto my face. "Depends on how good the Triad's security is." We swept through the entrance, leaving the noise of the street behind for the hushed, climate-controlled murmur of the elite. The ballroom was a sea of corruption dressed in couture. Chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, illuminating men who sold weapons to warlords and women who looked like they bathed in diamond dust. We hadn't been inside for 5 minutes before the vultures began to circle. "Yun, you elusive bastard." A young man in a white tuxedo separated himself from a group near the champagne tower. He had the slick, overly groomed look of a K-pop idol, but his eyes were glassy and cruel. Ji-hun, the son of the dragonhead of a rival clan. A spoiled prince with a reputation for violence against women. He ignored Young Sang completely, stepping right into my personal space. He smelled of expensive sake and entitlement. "And who is this exquisite creature?" Ji-hyun asked, reaching out to take my hand before I could offer it. He brought my knuckles to his lips, his eyes undressing me. I didn't think the phantom had a taste for such vibrant beauty. I felt Young Sang stiffen beside me. A low tension radiated off him, like a reactor core heating up. "Tabia," I said, pulling my hand back a fraction too sharply. "And I'm taken." Ji-hoon laughed, a wet, unpleasant sound. "Taken? Darling, in our world, everything is negotiable. Why don't you ditch the ghost and come have a drink with someone who actually knows how to live?" He reached for my waist. It happened so fast, the people around us didn't even notice. Young Sang's hand shot out, clamping onto Ji-hoon's shoulder. It looked like a friendly gesture, a pat between colleagues. But I saw Ji-hoon's face go white. Young Sang was squeezing a pressure point, driving his thumb into the nerve cluster. Young Sang leaned in. He didn't shout. He didn't make a scene. He brought his face close to Ji-hoon's, smiling that terrifying dead smile. "If you touch her again," Young Sang whispered, his voice low and smooth like velvet over gravel, "I will cut out your tongue and mail it to your father in a gift box." Ji-hoon's knees buckled slightly. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking sickly under the ballroom lights. Young Sang released him. "Enjoy the party, Ji-hoon." The rival heir scrambled away, disappearing into the crowd without a backward glance. Young Sang turned to me, his expression cooling instantly. He adjusted the strap of my dress, his touch gentle now, contrasting the violence of his threat. "Focus," he said quietly. "The target is moving toward the private elevators." I saw," I said, my heart hammering. "You have a flair for the dramatic, don't you?" "I protect what is mine," he said simply. He guided me toward the edge of the dance floor, near the service corridors. The music swelled, a waltz. "This is it," he said. "The cameras cover the main hall. The blind spot is through that door. You have 20 minutes. He pulled me close. To the room it looked like a romantic moment before a dance. He tilted my chin up. "The microphone is live. he reminded me. "I'll be in your ear the whole time." He leaned down and kissed my cheek. His lips were warm, lingering against my skin for a second longer than necessary. It was a signal, a performance, and a goodbye all at once. "Go," he breathed against my ear, the sound sending a jolt through my nervous system. "Don't make me regret trusting you." I pulled away, flashing him one last flirtatious smile for the audience, and slipped through the service door. The music faded. The laughter died. I was back in the silence. The fiancé was gone. The thief was back. Silk is not tactical gear. That was the only thought looping through my mind as I shimmied through the service duct, my knees bruising against the galvanized steel. The magnificent red dress, which had looked so elegant under the chandeliers, was currently my worst enemy. The fabric caught on a screwhead. Ryep. I winced as a jagged tear opened up the side of the skirt. $4,000 of Italian design ruined in a heartbeat. Young Sang would probably bill me for it. I pushed forward, the air in the vent smelling of stale dust and recirculated kitchen grease, a sharp contrast to the expensive perfume clinging to my skin. I had ditched the heels back at the service entrance. I was barefoot, silent, and moving fast. "Talk to me." Young Sang's voice crackled in my ear, transmitted through the diamonds around my neck. "Pulse check." "I'm in the ceiling of the west corridor," I whispered, barely moving my lips. "Heart rate is 110. I'm bored. How's the party?" "Tedious," he replied. "I'm currently listening to a senator explain why he needs a bribe increase." "Hurry up, Tabia. I don't know how long I can keep smiling without biting someone." I reached the vent grate. Through the slats, I could see the hallway leading to the server room. It wasn't empty. A single guard was posted by the door. He was big, Triad muscle. He wasn't looking at his phone, he was scanning the hall. Professional. "Obstacle," I whispered, going dark. I unlatched the grate. It made a soft metallic click. I waited for the AC unit to cycle on, masking the sound of me lowering myself to the floor. I dropped. My bare feet made no sound on the carpet. I needed to be fast. I couldn't use the knife. Blood would trigger the chemical sniffers in the ventilation. It had to be clean. I moved like a shadow. I was 3 feet away when he sensed me. He started to turn, his hand reaching for his radio. Too late. I launched myself onto his back, wrapping my legs around his waist. My arms snaked around his throat, locking into a blood choke. He thrashed, slamming me backward into the wall. The impact knocked the wind out of me, but I didn't let go. I squeezed, cutting off the blood flow to his brain. 1 second. 2. 3. His struggles weakened. His arms dropped. He went limp. I released him, guiding his unconscious body gently to the floor so it wouldn't make a thud. I checked his pulse, strong, steady. He'd be out for 10 minutes. "Sleep tight," I murmured. I turned to the server room door. The lock was a bi-directional keypad with a retinal scanner. High-end, but not impossible. I pulled a slim interface cable from the hidden pocket of my dress and jacked it into the panel's service port. I used the cracking software Young Sang had loaded onto my phone. Access granted. The door hissed open. The server room was a freezer. Rows of black towers hummed with blue lead eyes, the fans whirring like a hive of angry hornets. The cold air raised goosebumps on my exposed arms. I moved to the main terminal. This was it. The debt eraser. The freedom ticket. I typed in the query parameters Young Sang had given me. Project. Chimera. The system churned for a moment, then pinged. A single file appeared. It wasn't a blueprint. It wasn't a code packet. It was a video file. Dated 12 years ago. I frowned. A prototype drive shouldn't be 12 years old. My thief's paranoia, the instinct that had kept me alive this long, flared up. Never grab the loot until you know what it is. I tapped the file. The video player opened. The footage was grainy, black and white surveillance from a security camera. It showed an office. An older man sat behind a desk, the previous head of the Black Lotus. I recognized him from news clippings. The door in the video opened. A young man walked in. He looked to be about 18, lanky but with the same sharp, predatory walk. Young Sang. They argued. There was no audio, but the body language was violent. The older man struck Young Sang across the face. Young Sang didn't flinch. Then, the violence exploded. Young Sang lunged. It wasn't a fight, it was an execution. He used a letter opener. It was brutal, messy, and personal. I watched, hand covering my mouth, as the 18-year-old boy on the screen wiped the blood from his hands, picked up the phone, and presumably called the cleaners. I froze. The cold of the room seeped into my bones. This wasn't a prototype. This was a death warrant. In the underworld, patricide was the ultimate sin. If the other families saw this, if his own captains saw this, Young Sang wouldn't just lose his empire. He would be hunted down and butchered. The Iron Triad wasn't holding a decryption key. They were holding the gun to his head. Tabia, his voice came through the earpiece, sharp with tension. Status? You've been silent for 2 minutes. I stared at the screen. The drive was in the port. I held his life in my hands. The realization washed over me with dizzying speed. I could take this. I could copy it to my own cloud server. I could walk out of here and tell Young Sang, let me go, wipe the debt, and give me $5 million, or the whole world sees you kill your father. It was the smart play. It was the thief's play. It was the ultimate leverage. But then, I remembered the library. I remembered the darkness, the smell of whiskey, and the hollow look in his eyes when he said, respect is messy. Love is a liability. He hadn't sent a soldier. He hadn't sent a hitman. He had sent me. He had trusted me with the one thing that could destroy him. Tabia. I looked at the young boy on the screen, covered in blood, standing alone in the office of a dead man. I saw the loneliness that had started that day and never ended. I wasn't just a thief anymore. And he wasn't just a mark. I have it, I said, my voice shaking slightly. I'm securing the package. I didn't copy the file to my cloud. Instead, I accessed the server's root directory. I selected the file on their drive. Delete. Secure erase. Overwrite 7 passes. I watched the progress bar. The Triad's copy was gone. Dust. I yanked the physical drive out of the terminal. The only copy left in existence was now in my hand. I'm coming out, I said into the air. Get the car ready. I tucked the drive into the bodice of my torn dress, right against my heart. I wasn't bringing him a prize. I was bringing him his life back. Understood, he replied. Move. I turned and ran, ignoring the pain in my knees and the cold in the air. The heist was over. The war was just beginning. I thought I was home free. That was my first mistake. I burst through the service doors, expecting the cool night air of the loading dock. Instead, I ran straight into a wall of black suits. There were 6 of them. Triad enforcers. They didn't look like the tuxedoed guests in the ballroom. They looked like butchers who had clocked in for a shift. Going somewhere, Miss Hill? I didn't even have time to reach for the knife. Strong hands grabbed my arms, twisting them behind my back with a force that made my shoulders pop. I kicked out, my bare foot connecting with a shin, but it was like kicking a concrete pillar. Get off me. I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat. They didn't speak. They just dragged me. Not out toward the exit, but back the way I came. Back toward the music. They hauled me through the velvet curtains and threw me onto the polished marble floor of the main ballroom. I slid, the friction burning my skin, the red silk of my ruined dress tangling around my legs. The orchestra faltered. The violins screeched to a halt. A collective gasp rippled through the room. It started as a murmur and swelled into a wave of shocked silence. The clinking of champagne glasses stopped. The laughter died. I scrambled to my knees, pushing hair out of my face. I was a mess, barefoot, bleeding from a cut on my arm, my dress torn to shreds. I looked like a feral animal that had crashed a royal wedding. And standing in the center of the room, not 20 feet away, was Director Choi. The head of the Iron Triad was an older man, with a face like a dried apple and eyes like wet stones. He held a chrome-plated pistol loosely at his side. He smiled, and it was the ugliest thing I had ever seen. A dramatic entrance, Choi announced, his voice booming in the silent hall. But fitting for a thief. I looked past him. Young Sang was standing near the ice sculpture. He hadn't moved. He was frozen, his hand halfway to his inside pocket. His face was a mask of stone, but his eyes were burning. He looked at me, at the blood on my arm, the terror in my posture, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Choi stepped forward, grabbing a handful of my hair. He yanked my head back, forcing me to look up at him, and pressed the cold muzzle of the pistol against my temple. The crowd screamed. A few people dropped to the floor. Most just froze, too terrified to run. "Director Choi," Young Song said. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the ballroom like a crack of thunder. "Release her." "Release her?" Choi laughed. He tightened his grip on my hair. "You think you can walk into my house, send your little pet rat to steal from my servers, and then give orders? You are arrogant, Young Sang, even for a bastard." Choi looked at the crowd, playing to the audience. "Look at her," he shouted, gesturing to me with the gun. "You all think she is his fiancée? His queen? She is a street rat. A thief he hired to rob me while he drank my champagne." Humiliation burned my cheeks, hot and shameful. But I didn't look at the crowd. I looked at Young Sang. He didn't care. He wasn't looking at the guests. He wasn't looking at Choi. He was looking at the gun pressed against my head. "I don't care who she is," Young Song said, stepping forward. The crowd parted around him like the Red Sea, terrified of the aura of violence radiating off him. "She is with me. She has my property," Choi snarled, pressing the barrel harder against my skin. It hurt. "The drive, Young Song. Give me the drive, and surrender your territory in Gangnam. Sign the papers tonight, and I might let her live." I felt the hard plastic of the drive pressed against my skin, hidden inside my bodice. The evidence of his patricide. The secret that would ruin him. I could end this. I could shout that I had it. I could throw it to Choi and beg for mercy. But I looked at Young Sang, the man who had sat with me in the dark, the man who was just as lonely as I was. "Don't do it," I choked out. "Young Sang, don't give him anything. Shut up." Choi struck me across the face with the back of his hand. The sound of the slap echoed like a gunshot. My head snapped to the side. I tasted blood. That was the breaking point. Young Sang didn't yell. He didn't negotiate. The civilized veneer of the businessman vanished. The phantom emerged. In one fluid motion, he drew a massive, matte black Desert Eagle from his shoulder holster. The crowd shrieked in unison, a chaotic wall of noise. Guests scrambled, overturning tables, shattering glass. But Young Sang didn't flinch. He leveled the weapon at Choi's head. "You touched her," Young Song whispered. It was a sound of pure disbelief, as if Choi had just touched a holy relic with dirty hands. "Put the gun down." Choi screamed, using me as a human shield. He huddled behind me, the barrel of his gun digging into my skull. "I'll blow her brains out. I swear it." Young Song continued to walk forward, step by steady step. He held the heavy gun with one hand, his arm perfectly straight, his aim unwavering. "Shoot her," Young Sang challenged. "Go ahead." My heart stopped. "What?" "Shoot her," Young Sang repeated, his voice vibrating with a terrifying intensity. "And before her body hits the floor, I will put a bullet between your eyes. Then I will kill your sons. Then I will burn your house down with your ancestors inside. I will erase the name Choi from history." He stopped 10 feet away. The barrel of his gun was a black eye staring death into Choi's face. "There is no version of tonight where you walk out of here alive if she dies," Young Song said. "So, let's play the game. Do you want to die alone? Or do you want to die knowing your entire bloodline ends with you?" Choi's hand was shaking. I could feel the tremors through the gun barrel. He looked at Young Song's eyes and saw the truth. This wasn't a bluff. This was a promise. "Let her go," Young Sang roared, his voice finally breaking the sound barrier, shaking the crystal chandeliers above us. "Or I burn this city to ash." The silence that followed was heavy. suffocating. The only sound was my own jagged breathing and the terrified whimpering of a guest under a table. Choi looked at me. He looked at the demon standing in front of him. "You're crazy," Choi whispered. "You're actually crazy." 3, Young Sang counted. "Wait. 2. Choi shoved me. He pushed me forward with all his strength, turning to run toward the back exit. I stumbled, falling to my hands and knees. Bang. Bang. 2 shots rang out. Deafening. I flinched, curling into a ball, waiting for the pain. But it didn't come. I looked up. Choi was on the ground near the exit, writhing, clutching his kneecaps. Young Sang had crippled him. But Young Sang wasn't looking at his enemy. He was already on his knees beside me, holstering his weapon, his hands frantic as they touched my face, my arms checking for wounds. "Tabia," he breathed, his voice broken. "Tabia, look at me." I looked at him. The rage was gone, replaced by a desperate, overwhelming relief. "I'm okay," I whispered. "I'm okay." He pulled me into his chest, burying his face in my neck. He held me so tight it hurt, rocking me back and forth in the middle of the ruined ballroom. "I thought I lost you," he murmured against my skin. "I thought I lost you." And in that moment, with the sirens wailing in the distance and the smell of gunpowder in the air, I knew the heist was the least of my problems. I had stolen the diamond, I had stolen the drive, but somewhere along the way I had accidentally stolen the devil's heart. And he had stolen mine. Kill them. Director Choi's scream tore through the stunned silence of the ballroom. He was clutching his shattered knees, his face twisted into a mask of pure hate. Kill them both. The spell broke. The 6 Triad enforcers who had dragged me in surged forward. More were pouring in through the main doors, weapons drawn. Young Sang didn't hesitate. He didn't look at me, he just moved, his body reacting with the precision of a machine calibrated for war. "Stay close," he commanded, his voice a low growl. He raised the Desert Eagle. Boom. Boom. 2 guards dropped, chests exploding in a spray of red that misted the white tablecloths. I didn't cower. The fear that had paralyzed me moments ago was gone, replaced by a cold, crystalline focus. I reached down to the hem of my ruined dress and ripped a long strip of silk free, wrapping it around my bleeding hand to improve my grip on the knife. A guard lunged at Young Sang from the left, a baton raised to crack his skull. Young Sang was engaging 2 targets on the right. He didn't see it. My blind spot. My job. I pivoted, driving my shoulder into the attacker's midsection. As he doubled over, surprised by the resistance of a helpless girl, I slashed upward. The ceramic blade bit deep into his thigh. He howled and collapsed. Young Sang spun, sensing the threat neutralized. He put a bullet in the man's shoulder to keep him down, then grabbed my arm. "Move." We became a single entity. A whirlwind of violence cutting a path through the elite of Seoul. We moved back to back, a rotating turret of death. He was the hammer, thunderous, unstoppable force. I was the scalpel, deflecting blows, slashing tendons, watching the angles he couldn't see. We crashed through the double doors into the kitchen. Stainless steel counters, steaming pots, terrified chefs diving for cover. 3 more guards blocked the exit. "Head down," Young Sang shouted. He kicked a service cart, sending it careening into the first guard. In the confusion, he fired 3 shots, clean, efficient. John Wick in a tuxedo. We burst out onto the loading dock. The rain was torrential now, a curtain of water that instantly soaked us to the bone. Young Sang's sleek black sedan was idling where his driver had left it, the engine purring. "Get in." He shoved me into the passenger seat and vaulted over the hood, sliding into the driver's side. Bullets sparked against the pavement around us. The rear window shattered as we peeled out, the tires screaming in protest against the wet asphalt. Young Sang drifted the car around the corner, clipping a dumpster, and punched the accelerator. The G-force pinned me to the seat. We tore down the hill, leaving the chaos, the blood, and the ruined gala behind in a blur of red taillights. The city blurred past us, streaks of neon blue and yellow reflecting on the wet windshield. Young Sang drove like a madman, weaving through traffic, running red lights. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The silence in the car was deafening. The only sounds were the roar of the engine and the frantic rhythm of our own breathing. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving behind the shakes. I looked at him. His face was splashed with blood. Some his, some mine, some from the men he'd killed. He looked terrifying. He looked beautiful. "The drive," he said. He didn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on the road, hard and unyielding. "You accessed the server," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "You saw the file." "I saw it," I admitted. "And you made a copy." "Yes." He laughed, a bitter hollow sound. "So, this is the part where you negotiate. You have the leverage. You have the gun to my head. What do you want, Tabia? 10 million? Safe passage to Europe? My territory?" He thought I was going to blackmail him. He thought I was just another shark in the tank. I reached into the bodice of my dress. My fingers brushed the cold plastic of the drive. It was warm from my body heat. "I don't want your money," I said quietly. "Everybody wants money," he snapped, swerving around a taxi. "Don't insult my intelligence. You hold the proof that I killed my father. You own me. Just name the price so we can stop pretending." I pulled the drive out. "Pull over," I said. "We are not stopping." "Pull over, young Sang," I yelled. He slammed on the brakes. The car skidded on the wet road, fishtailing before coming to a screeching halt under a highway overpass. He turned to me, his chest heaving, his eyes wild with fury and anticipation of the betrayal. "What?" he demanded. I took his hand. It was trembling. I placed the drive in his palm and closed his fingers over it. "There is no copy," I said, looking him dead in the eye. I wiped the Triad server. I scrubbed the cache. "That drive is the only thing left in existence." He stared at his fist, then at me. The confusion on his face broke my heart. He couldn't process it. He had lived in the dark for so long he didn't recognize the light when it was handed to him. "Why?" he whispered. "You could have destroyed me. You could have been free." "I am free," I said. I reached up, my hand cupping his jaw. "I didn't care about the blood. I didn't do it for the money. And I didn't do it because I was scared of you." I leaned in, my forehead resting against his. "I did it because I saw you in that video," I whispered. "I saw a lonely boy doing what he had to do to survive. And I don't want you to be alone in the dark anymore." He made a sound, halfway between a sob and a growl. The restraint snapped. He lunged across the center console, his hands tangled in my wet hair pulling me to him. He kissed me. It wasn't a movie kiss. It wasn't soft or sweet. It was a collision. It was bloody, desperate, and starving. It tasted of iron, rain, and whiskey. It was a kiss that said I survived and I need you all at once. I kissed him back with everything I had, my hands gripping the lapels of his ruined tuxedo, pulling him closer, trying to fuse our souls together. The fake fiancé lie incinerated in the heat between us. The thief and the mark were dead. He broke the kiss, gasping for air, his forehead resting against mine. His eyes were wide, searching mine, stripping me bare. "You are not leaving," he rasped, his voice rough with emotion. "You are never leaving. Try and make me," I challenged, breathless. He looked at the drive in his hand, then out the window at the rain. He tossed the drive onto the dashboard like it was trash. He didn't care about it anymore. He only cared about the woman in the passenger seat. "Let's go home," he said. He put the car in gear, and for the first time the destination wasn't a fortress. It was just a home. 3 months ago, walking down this hallway felt like walking down the throat of a monster. The air had been sterile, smelling of ozone and silent threats. Now, the mansion smelled of fresh lilies and roasted coffee. The walls of glass no longer felt like a cage. They were just windows looking out over a kingdom that was finally secure. I passed Chief Han at the security station. He didn't track my movement with suspicious eyes or reach for his radio. He simply straightened his tie and bowed his head. "Good evening, ma'am." "Evening, Han," I replied, not breaking stride. They didn't look at me as the thief anymore. They didn't even look at me as the boss's wife. They looked at me as the woman who had stood back to back with the Phantom in a room full of wolves and walked out covered in blood. That kind of respect couldn't be bought, it had to be bled for. I pushed open the heavy oak doors to the study. Young Sang was standing by the window, phone pressed to his ear, silhouetted against the burning orange of the Seoul sunset. He was wearing a crisp navy suit, looking every inch the emperor of the underworld. "I don't care about his excuses," Young Sang said into the phone, his voice cold enough to freeze water. "Tell him if the shipment is late again, he can ship himself in pieces. Do I make myself clear?" He turned as he hung up, the ruthless mask of the Phantom firmly in place. But the moment his eyes landed on me, the mask didn't just crack, it dissolved. The tension left his shoulders. The darkness in his gaze was replaced by a warmth reserved for exactly one person on this planet. I walked over to his massive mahogany desk. Sitting right in the center, acting as a ridiculously expensive paperweight, was the Star of Midnight. He had bought it at auction a week after the gala. He said he liked the irony. I picked up the diamond, tossing it casually in the air and catching it. Then I hopped up onto the desk, pushing aside a stack of dossiers to make room. I crossed my legs, settling in his space, owning it. Young Sang walked over, stopping between my knees. He rested his hands on my thighs, his thumbs brushing the fabric of my skirt. "You have that look in your eye," he murmured, a smirk playing on his lips. "Planning another heist, Mrs. Yun?" I laughed softly, leaning forward until our foreheads touched. I placed the diamond back on the desk, ignoring the millions of dollars glittering in the fading light. "No need," I whispered, my hand finding the back of his neck, pulling him down to me. "I already stole the only thing that matters." He kissed me then, a slow, deep promise of forever. Outside, the city lights began to flicker on, a million stars waking up in the dark. But I didn't need to look at them. I had my own darkness right here, and I was never letting go.
I absolutely love this story. She's fearless.